Hello world, Nai Coach here. I am a Truth Fire Dragon. I've been going hard all day working on trying to get to Data Bedrock, and so as a part of that I've pulled many samples. You may see them in the sample sort program listed as attention. Those are all the ones I'm currently trying to crack, and as I do so I'm getting some good ideas, but I'm not putting them out publicly yet. I want to just mull on them for a while, but I'm putting some soft speculation tags on them. And yeah, basically I have not had a chance to think of anything particular to talk about for this week's vlog, but my spirits want me to continue exercising that muscle, making sure I do it once a week. So I thought I would talk just off the cuff here about a conversation that Alcides and Dire Magpie are having about attraction between people who are of life mate possible material. That may mean that they can fill that role for I'm already doing it off the cuff. They may fill that role for a one-night stand. It may be a short-term relationship. It may be an open relationship. It may be long-term, may be monogamous, so on and so forth. But something that could hold that projection of your spirits for a period of time. All right. So Alcides was basically asking, how they work out. Talking about different samples he's seen, like Taylor Swift. She's a Zine, but she tends to not go out with Zenai. She tends to go out with Naiji and some other mojos like that. So talking about that, it really makes me think of something I've been tracking in general, which is the need for humans to understand how the mojo phenomenon works, obviously, but then what that means as far as perspective on things from a very long-term evolutionary, biology scope at coming at things. And then with that lens, noting how different our lives have changed based on certain technologies. And you can consider, the tools of legacy, artifacts that allowed people to start having significant traditions. That's a form of technology. As a part of that, there's a large theme of, the different vloggers I see comparing one group of people to another. And I believe what has happened is that there are, like in a cell, you have different, organelles or aspects within that given unit of, say, a tribe, but they're still seen as part of the tribe because the tribe is of a size, I don't know exact numbers, but fairly small in human history. If you take the whole, hominid history, most of the time we weren't hanging out in really large groups. So the specialty guilds and alchemies and sub-bubbles within a single tribe bubble, you could still see them. I mean, there were some bakers and such, and there were some people who did some blacksmithing and some people who did, ritual, religion stuff, whatever. But, but they were all clearly part of each other. As things got bigger and the ability to stack bubbles got stronger, there's dangers in it, but we have to do it, obviously. I mean, so I'm not saying don't do it, but there's the danger is you're used to being in a bubble that's actually a sub-bubble, but the sub-bubble so big, it feels like a whole bubble. It feels like a whole tribe. It feels like a whole world. Going back to Taylor Swift, if you're in the music industry, it's huge. And within it, there are all these genres, and then there are, there's the people who are on stage compared to the people who do work with the music, but they're behind the scenes a bit. And then there are people who are not involved with the music directly, but they're involved very much in the marketing, the promotion, the campaign of the tour or whatever. So each of those facets has become so big, they're worlds unto themselves. And this starts, I think, to confuse a lot of people on what exactly relationships are supposed to be, what entails we're always trying and not ever getting exactly, but still a somewhat solid attempt to get a holistic understanding of what humans are like. yeah, that's the first thing that I'm thinking, is that we have to acknowledge how strong those influences are. Next, and again, kind of this big perspective is, are humans meant to be in relationships for their entire lifetime, a single, say, monogamous, intimate relationship? Is that how it's supposed to go? I think there's a lot of ways you could answer that question that could be correct, but I think all of them would have to include the fact that humans live longer than they did before, and we're very complex, and we go through stages to where an earlier stage of us is quite different than later stages of us, because we can format ourselves so formidably. In the animal world, we're extremely good at formatting ourselves into things we want to be, and that's a great thing. We wouldn't want to give that up. But that means there'll be several versions of us. Even a person with great continuity of character, you would still need to do that in order to be just developing oneself throughout their entire lifetime. And so does that, which is just the way of it, but then the question is, how does that relate to relationships? Does that mean that relationships of that type cannot sustain that? Or if they do they need to go through certain rituals to sort of upgrade the relationship for the next level? Maybe taking renewal vows more seriously, making that a bigger thing, like a needed thing. You need to renew your vows, because you'll have to acknowledge this person who, your mate, and hopefully yourself as well, both you people are developing yourself so much that you're like a whole nother person. That's a good thing, but in order to do that, you have to be able to just grow. Let yourself grow, and then in that new you, then recognize that other person and their new self. Hopefully this is two new selves that are better than they were before, and perhaps it is right for them to continue to do their dance, and that can be something you plan on. I don't know the right answer for that. Or if perhaps relationships are just supposed to run a course and then move on, because I do know that dear friend is the status of relationship that should, Charlene and I are talking about this, all the things like, being a patriot, love for your country, love for family, love for an intimate partner, the relationship with one's religion, all these different things. With any person that is involved with that exchange, another human, it should take you to dear friend. It should be a conduit, a portal to getting to dear friend, the highest relationship you can have with another person, another being. But often those things vie for who's in charge, who's going to get that, major share, that supreme portioning of that commitment you are capable of. So there's a lot of things that vie in people's energies, and you really have to be looking at everything. So there's that, and the scale of it, and the time scale as well. So size scale, time scale, and the fact that's happening whenever you're looking at these aspects, because they're surely going to be influencing things. Okay, this gets into, yes, there's sexual attraction which aids in long-term compatibility attraction, but they are actually not the same thing. So, when relationships are being based more on that, because it can be based more in just a pure, raw, physical manner. It can be based in order to answer one of those many influences I talked about. Your family's leaning on you, the church is leaning on you, something's leaning on you, your citizenship requirements are leaning on you, whatever. Something's leaning on you that will heavily influence what is an ideal mate. Because if, say, citizenship is leaning on you very heavily, the need for it, well, if there is a nice person who is willing to do that, but they're not your ideal inspirational, that may be more helpful for you for that period of time. I hope this doesn't sound too bad. I'm just trying to speak just totally plainly. These are decisions people have to make, but I'm just trying to constellate what's going on in that decision-making process. So in that case, that could be something that could be more easily projected on. Even your muse, which would be your ideal inspirational, unconscious genius, it might be able to more easily project on a human being who is not that exact mojo design, but they're doing the motifs you most need to do right now. As compared to someone who is more, say, an ideal inspirational or some other kind of, energetically advantageous thing as just the innate instrumentation of it. But then there's a situation that the instrument finds itself in. In this case, if they are not interested in doing the motifs you need to do to peak, or they're not in a state to really work with you, either one combination, then perhaps that other way offers benefits. Because we see the data, and there's a lot of different relationships that get chosen. We also see that there's a theme of which ones get chosen the most over the long term. But in the short term, there's a lot of variety. And short term and long term, in certain bubbles, you'll see there's a tendency for certain designs to be idolized more. And therefore, they become more attractive as mates when you take it that the mate is going to be, if you're projecting your spirit heavily on that career bubble, then another being that can help you greatly in that regard, that's going to look really shiny to you, and it will be really shiny to you as it relates to what's going on in the story of existence. So there's the instrument and there's a situation, and they both are powerful modifiers. But obviously situations change, and the instrumentation does, and not the core mechanics, the momentum and the modulation and which powers answer which priorities and so on. That's a constant, and that's why we see this general trend for large numbers. You see the ideal inspirational and the ideal augmentation the most. You see those happening the most, and the rest of it is more fluid, and usually you can just explain a lot of them by sexuality. If a person is very just physically sexually attractive in general aesthetic terms, then there will be, for encounters of that kind, a lot of people, for example, in porn or adult entertainment, of the X-rated variety, there's a few mojos that do that more than other people do. But I don't think those are the only mojo designs that are taking advantage of that product. So that means that a lot of people are seeing in that way, that's definitely one variety of intimate partner. Maybe even a life partner for a while you're doing that, however long that, we don't call that affair, that sexual affair goes on. But then, you also have, I think, the rest of it can be explained by the powerful influence it is to have your unconscious genius reflect a world that sees you and validates you. So if your world happens to be one of these sub-bubbles we talked about, then what a person in there who you could project your unconscious genius spirit onto, you could make that connection to, if they also would cause you to be highly bonus stacked in getting favorable feedback, favorable reactions and engagements with the environment, that can add a lot. So that seems to be the general trend. Obviously, we'll keep studying it. And then I guess what I kind of described there is basically inspirational, augmentation, and then compartmentalizing / compensating. But then we'll mention also the suppression. Is sometimes the suppression is you see something that's like your unconscious genius, but it answers something that may worry you a lot. For example, we see Xeni sometimes with Zhiny. I'm guessing what might go on there is, for example, them seeing that, it is the person answers that quadrant for me. They're similar to my unconscious genius, my other. But there is an aspect, for example, let's say Zhiny, they're a rift that through life experiences, they're used to Xeni in general. Xi can be not their strongest area unless they fetish on that. Even if they have it just strongly for their overall peak pathway, it's not as consistent or on as another mojo would be just without any fetishing bonus stacking going on. So perhaps they've been dinged a lot. The Zhai has been dinged a lot by life in that regard, like a Zez regard. And so the Zinai, if they may have like good Zhai, they can do a lot of maneuvers that a Zinai can do, and their Z, because of the state of being. So we talked about the instrument innately, we talked about the situation around it, and then those two together create also just like a setting where it's currently set at. And that can be where they'll find, even to say suppression riff, a suppression to kind of be like maybe a rare thing, a Zinai with really good Zai. Like that's actually what, say, maybe a particular Zhai may want. That's quite rare to find, and if you're really trying to find that thing, a Zinai with good Zhai you might go, oh, aha! It can do a lot of the same things as a Zinai with really strong Zai, and perhaps you think that's what's going on. There's probably a lot more to it than that. These are just some initial thoughts on the subject, but it is a fascinating subject. It relates to mojo in general, and of course that magical area of our unconscious where we get all these cool drives and abilities, but it's so mysterious and it throws us around. So anything we can do to try and figure out some is quite helpful. All right, take care, and I'll talk to you later.